Good afternoon, everyone. Hi. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ambrosia Crump. We're with Clark County Social Service. I help to coordinate this and other events. This particular event, we partnered with an organization entitled AIP, and we'll be hearing more from that founder of that organization, Lena Walther. She helps to provide prevention and awareness around the topic of human trafficking in our valley. And so we're grateful for that partnership this year, in addition to our normal connections with our community service providers who serve this population. Just some quick announcements before we get started. If you haven't found it already, to your right before you would exit our building at the Government Center, you can find restrooms if you need to utilize those. We do have built into our session a 15-minute break halfway through, so that's an opportunity to take advantage of that resource, or our cafeteria or vending machines, network with each other. You might see some friends you haven't seen in a long time in this room, some of you, so that's a great opportunity to do that. However, in between that time, we just ask that you help us get through all of our presenters. We have some great presenters from different relationships with the topic, whether they're advocates in the community, a faith-based partner, direct service providers who touch the population. So we have a lot of speakers to talk about this topic. Because of that, if you didn't get the email from me already, this particular session was extended until 4:30, which means more CUs for some of you guys, but that does mean that we have an extended day because of our topics and our presenters that we're going to go through today. So just to remind you guys of that if we didn't know that already. So one other shameless plug I have for you guys, if you didn't get this already, Family Connect is coming up on May 6th. Family Connect is a shoot-off from our Project Homeless Connect event, which is an annual event that we typically have at Cashman Field for all of our community service partners to come together and provide a one-stop shop service delivery to those who are in most need of resources from that homeless service population. So that Family Connect are for families who may not necessarily be homeless yet, but maybe they're making decisions between paying their rent or meeting their child care expense, paying rent or buying food this month, and maybe they're just not well connected to our community resources, or really just need to finally meet with that service provider in a setting that is conducive for them. So the event will be taking place Saturday, May 6th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. It's going to be held at Valley High School, so it's coming up soon. The flyer that I gave you guys is both in English, and on the back is also Spanish, so feel free to post that in your respective agencies so that your clients and other partners are aware of this event and hopefully can connect to those resources as they need to do that. So without further ado, we'll be hearing first from Chaplain Barry. He is an advocate for the population for human trafficking. He just has some material to share with you guys based on his perspective of what he does to further support the needs that we have in this community around the issue of sex trafficking. So please help me welcome our first speaker.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm clergy, so before we start, I'm going to pray us in. If you wish to join me, that's fine. If you wish not to, that's fine too. So those that wish to, bow your heads. Dear Lord, please bless these folks for coming here to learn more about how to save kids. Bless their families. And please give me the words that I can use that are positive and will leave a lasting impression. In his name I pray, amen. Short and sweet. I love short prayers. I love short prayers, probably because I'm getting older. We're here to discuss awareness, because not only is it an essential part to prevention, but it aids in intervention. We're all eyes and ears of the community. We all have a responsibility to help each other. Now, the presentation I'm giving is only about 20 minutes long. So we emailed you detailed handouts, which I'm not sure whether you brought with you or not, but at least you'll have them in your email. So the subject matter that I go over here is emphasized in the email that you received with the handouts. We have to be careful that if we see a potential victim, that we look not only at the person, but the surroundings. Because if the victim is being trafficked, there's at least 2 pimps close by. And pimps are like rattlesnakes. They always go in pair, and it's no disrespect meant to rattlesnakes. Do not assume or prejudge, because you're talking about people that have got tremendous low self-esteem because of what they've been through. Always ask questions respectfully. And if you need assistance, call and ask for help. And I've given you some numbers to call a little bit later on. You've got to be a good witness. In order to be a good witness, you've got to know about awareness. We all know the definition, I hope, of human trafficking. It's offering a child under the age of 18 to have sex. It's human trafficking. It doesn't matter if they're forced, whether there's fraud, coercion. If a kid is under 18 and it's been offering her body for sex, she's being trafficked. She is a victim. There's 3 facets to the crime that we have, which we're going to briefly discuss: the victim, the pimp, and the demand. Victim first. It's essential that we understand the victims in these crimes. One of the handouts that I gave you, and I'll refer to these handouts, and even if you didn't bring them, you've got copies of my PowerPoint, and each slide refers to where the handout is. A victim could be anybody's son, daughter, niece, cousin, friend. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what geographic location. It doesn't matter what economic situation they're in. They could be from a very affluent family. The statistics that I provided you, there's 3 that are really important to me. One of them is 80% of the kids being trafficked come from here. They're not imported, they come from here. Average age is 14, youngest age 12. I understand that there's an investigation going on where the youngest age is 9. The most devastating of this is 30%, it's a little higher now, of the kids being trafficked are trafficked by their own families. Fathers, mothers, aunts, uncles. So how does a kid get into a situation like this? I call it, what are the steps to slavery? And that is referred to in the handout that I gave you. The initial warning signs: I love you. I can give you things your parents can't give you. I'm going to treat you with more respect. I've got a great career opportunity for you. And once that happens, they have sex. When that's done, the next step is called seasoning. And by the way, all the different seasoning techniques are in there, and I'm not going to go through them now because of the time limitations. But we're talking about browbeating, coercion, we're talking about beatings, we're talking about branding, threatening. Those are the techniques that are used. What are the results? Obviously, how can an adult go through this life and not come up with poor mental health and poor physical health? Complete loss of control. They're not responsible. They can't tell people where they're going. They don't have an identification, most of them. They can't leave their home or place of work because of fear. And the result? Destroyed life. There's 3 types of pimps. I'm not going to go over them. You can Google that. Don't you love Google? Because it stops you from thinking. It's so cool that you can do that. So I encourage you to look and see what the different types of pimps are. Pretty well self-explanatory, but go ahead and do that. Why and where? For pimps, it's all about money. A pimp can make about $250,000 on one sex slave a year. And they average from 4 to 6. So it's all about money. It's not about a human being. Where are they found? I don't know. Malls, schools, places of worship. shopping centers, your friend's house. Circles dominated by pimps, legal brothels, gentlemen's club, and I really use that term loosely, okay? Gentlemen's clubs, where pimps control the girls that are in there. So this thing about a victimless crime, it's far from true. Gangs, which I'm going to talk about in a few minutes, because they have really increased their productivity, so to speak. And the most dangerous source right now, I know you've got an outline, so there it is. Social media. Social media, between Backpage and some of the other social media sites, have more information about where you can get a young girl than all the sites have about where you can get religious freedom. And the scary part of it is 1 out of 3 sex trafficking cases originates from social media. Gangs. 1 out of 6 human traffickers are now gang members. They're organized. They have relationships with the Mexican cartels. Why? Human trafficking is low risk and high reward. 6 to 10%, actually it's closer to 10% of the gang members are female. So whatever these young ladies do in gangs before trafficking, now some of them become what they call bottom girls. And if you look at a definition, that means a girl that's in charge of the other sex slaves. They're in charge for discipline, recruiting, etc. Rival gangs even partner to make hybrid gangs. So gangs that ordinarily don't like each other will form a division, sounds like a corporation, doesn't it? Forms a division which will, in essence, get them to work together because of all the money that's involved. Here comes the part that I really don't like. Demand. Why is there demand? There's some of the reasons. Not justifying why adult males rather than men, I think it's a better description, want young girls, but there's some of the reasons right there. And some can be executives, some can be clergy. I can say that because I'm clergy. Some can be law enforcement. Some can work for fire departments. You can't judge a book by its cover. But those are the symptoms. That is what causes people, guys, to act irresponsibly. And of course, their training school is porn, because that's a contributor and a catalyst. Again, there was a handout on porn. Interesting facts on porn. You can look it up and see what it is, but basically billions of dollars per year on porn are spent, either rented porn or whatever. And pimps use porn to hurt victims. They use them as training vehicles to show young girls how to have sex with their johns or clients, or garbage people, as I call them. And what are the consequences of porn on viewers? It's called desensitizing. You get a guy, got low self-esteem, and whatever else we can describe, he sees porn, he gets excited because they're using young girls. And if they're not kids, they're in their early 20s to make them look young. They go to level 2 because they're not getting enough of that, and they get to more severe. Oh, they go to level 3. I'm still not getting enough of that. Pardon my vernacular, I can't get off on that. So now we're going to go to the real thing. And we're going to look for the young girls to try to make current what I learned in porn. There's ways for us to avoid that. One of the groups is Be a Voice Now, run by a very good friend of mine, Pastor Aaron Hensel. We started this several years ago, where we get guys together to talk about porn. Our first meeting, we had eight guys showed up. 78 went online, but 8 showed up. Most recently, we had 56 show up. And once a year, we have a walk with families to march against porn, to make people understand how bad porn is. We're not going to talk about legislation because for sure you're going to fall asleep. But what I've done is I've given you a list of all the legislation that is out up until 2015 on human trafficking. But I want to spend oh, by the way, Nevada is tier 1 when it comes to laws and human trafficking. And that's a good thing, by the way. Tier 3 is a bad thing. Tier 1 is a good thing. We still have a ways to go. But my personal thanks to my good friend, Catherine Cortez Masto, for when she was Attorney General, she spearheaded AB 67, which is the first human trafficking law in the state of Nevada. And some of the speakers today were also responsible for assisting in lobbying to get that legislation through, which, by the way, went through unanimously. So I thank Senator Catherine for all her work. How do we prevent this? Now you're all experts. Oh, what? No? No? Come on. But even with the knowledge that you're going to gain here and the handouts, which I pray that you look at these handouts, and when you get a chance, you're home, you're watching TV, you have a family, look at them and see how devastating these crimes are. This PowerPoint can't do justice, but we are limited on time. But with training, without action, means nothing. It means you wasted your time. You get your CE credits and, wow, that's good, I'm gone. And in the meantime, kids' lives are being destroyed because we need your help to save lives. Importance of partnerships. A high-level Metro police officer said one time at a meeting, we cannot arrest our way out of this problem. They can't. Prevention is the cure. Are we going to save everybody? No. But we'll be able to save, if everybody in this room saves one life in a day, one life, multiplied by how many people, by how many days? My goal every day when I wake up, first of all, I thank God that I woke up. That's a start. But then secondly, I say, please let me help people and save a life today. That's my goal every day, 7 days a week. Partnerships are essential. With faith-based organizations, I gave you all a list of community groups. There must be about 20 on there, in your handouts, by the way. I chose not to put the phone numbers and email address and websites on there, because I figured if you're interested, you'll Google it. But then the Holy Spirit said, you're being mean. So on the second page of it, I gave you some phone numbers of emergencies that you can go to. He told me, Barry, put your ego in your pocket and be a chaplain like you're supposed to. So in that handout that we sent you, the first page is a whole bunch of organizations that are fighting human trafficking. And the second page, emergency numbers that you can deal with. And they also provide service providers, government services. There's a lot of folks out there that are trying to help and save children. So it's not just 1 or 2 or 3 of us that you're gonna see today. There's a lot of people. The booklet that hopefully you picked up a copy, which is Traffic No More, is a booklet that we printed 150,000 copies. Pastor Troy Martinez. And we distributed them to Clark County School District, where the health teachers present the students briefings on awareness of human trafficking. So 6,000 students a semester are hearing about the subject that you're hearing about. Prevention reduces intervention. There's really no numbers. I can't tell you that, well, we save lives because I'm talking to you today. But I've got numerous emails from people saying, thank you for your presentation. I happen to be talking to a friend of mine who said, oh my gosh, that sounds like something my daughter is doing with her boyfriend. So awareness will hopefully reduce the need for intervention. Eliminate it? Of course not. But at least you'll have more than just our eyes out there. You'll have our friends' eyes out there. Saving seeds result in fruit that flourish. Actually, that's kind of a spin-off on Genesis, but that's okay. Be a parent, not a friend. The older my kids get, the more right I was when I was raising them. And those of us here that are parents or grandparents and that have adult kids, you know that's the truth. The sign of being a good parent, let's say a father, isn't for your daughter to say, thank you, Daddy, for letting me do what I want to do. The sign of being a good father is saying, Daddy, I hate you for grounding me. I got that a lot, by the way. Not anymore, but back when she was a teenager. She always apologized, as a sidebar, for all the things she did when she was a teenager. And I said, honey, don't worry about it. You're still alive. I'm asking you to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. Closing your eyes makes us part of the problem. Getting involved makes us part of the solution. And look at the responsibilities you folks have in your jobs. You should be able to, will be able to spot danger and pass it on to someone. Well, as far as saving lives, I'm going to try to save a couple right here today. What not to do. Do not attempt the rescue. Please do not. These girls are being watched. Remember the rattlesnakes? They're being watched. And as one lady told me as I'm working with her on missing kids, I said, what would you do if you ran into a victim? Well, I put her in my car. I said, good, I can come visit you in visiting hours in the detention center. It's kidnapping. Never, never confront a pimp or a John, ever. You can't mess with a pimp's money. Remember, they're not human to the pimp. So they're going to take drastic action against somebody who goes up and says, you can't do that. And the John might take drastic action because you put it in his face how bad, the bad acts that he's doing. They are victims, but they're also predators. Why? Because they're more afraid of pimps than they are you. They've been brainwashed. Now, I know I'm saying girls. We know 15, 20% are boys, but since the majority are girls, that's why I always say she, but there are boys that are experiencing the same travesty as we're talking about here. This is what you should do. If you see any of the red flags, those are the phone numbers you should call. The 888 number is perfect because it leads to every organization in the country where that call was originated, and they'll pass on the information. We don't want heroes. We want people that'll be saving lives. That was a very brief presentation on the travesty of this particular crime that we're experiencing. Do anybody have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
When you brought up about classes by the health teacher in the schools, are any of the students bringing up about they're already aware of it, or are they not aware of it? Has there been any, because of the class, a young gal maybe come forward and ask for help?
The feedback, I've gotten two bits of feedback. One is that it's been very enlightening, and the students, though they're not going to open up to the health teachers as much as you and I would like them to, they are listening because you can tell their eyes, they're sitting up in their seats and do not just crouch back like that. The other is a problem that we're having. There are one or two teachers out there that don't want to bring it up because it's such a travesty subject. We're working on that part. So I don't have a direct answer for you, but anytime you communicate it to people and they talk to people, it's going to be a benefit. It's the best I can do. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I've got a question on one of these statistics on the first page
Yeah.
of this handout. For the child pornography, it says most of these convictions were from Southern Nevada.
Yeah, there's real quick, and I don't want to extend more than I have to here. There was there it is, a sting in 2014. And the results of this sting are in one of the handouts. I didn't have time to put it on there, so if I have a minute or two, I can do it real quickly. Law enforcement recovered over 500,000 illicit pictures, 2,700 videos. They had 219 convictions, mostly from Southern Nevada, and it was all from a 6-month period of time. From what? 6-month period of time. From June of 2014 to December in 2014. There's other things going on now, but obviously I'm not at liberty to say, but this is public information right here. So that's where those statistics came from. One sting in Southern Nevada.
Oh, okay, so this was just from the state of Nevada.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I was thinking since it was federal, that you were like a hub for child porn throughout the United States. Okay, then you answered my question. Thank you.
Well, we are a hub, but that's just, the sting is just from here.
Okay.
Any other questions? My wheelchair and I will be here at the end of the presentations. If I'll stick around, anybody has any questions, my phone number and email address are in those handouts that I gave you. God bless you all for being here. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Chaplain Barry. So next we'll be, oh, you can leave it here. Sorry. Next we'll be hearing from Lena Walthers. She is the founder of an organization entitled Awareness is Prevention. That was the AIP organization I briefly mentioned at our start. She started that organization in 2014 because of her involvement as a Swedish consular here in Nevada and being involved in a scenario where she had to rescue Swedish citizens, I can say that 3 times, Swedish citizens who were found to be trafficked and had to be sent back to their country. So she helped to arrange that for those individuals, and because of that, she started to become an advocate for the population and founded that organization, and they partnered with us today to help us put on this event for you guys. So please help me welcome our next speaker here. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for being here. I don't know how much you have heard about the trafficking problem throughout the years. I'm not going to go into my normal presentation because it will be very much like Chaplain Barry's. I speak about the awareness, I speak about the statistics and all that. Instead, I'm going to talk about what I do as a consul. We are 24 consuls here representing foreign countries. 2 are consul generals, which is a career consulate, that's Mexico and El Salvador. The rest of us are honorary consuls. When you find a foreign national, you should try to contact the consul, and if the country isn't represented in Nevada, it is in California, and they will cover Nevada. We can do a lot to help out. What I had to do in the beginning, before I even knew anything about trafficking, and this is a little more than 10 years ago, I had a young Swedish girl who had a baby with a pimp, and she had been there for a year and a half. Baby was about 4 months old. And she called me one Saturday morning and said, "Can you come and get me?" I said, "No, absolutely not." I said, "You take that little baby and run any chance you have and get to a phone and call 911. And the police will take you to a shelter, which they did. They took her to a shade tree. It took her about 2 weeks to get to this point. And then I came down and arranged for the paperwork, arranged for temporary passports and the tickets so they could get out of here within a week before the pimp even had a clue what had happened to her. And that was interesting enough with the passports because the baby didn't have a father's name on the birth certificate. And I don't know how familiar are with passports, but you cannot issue a passport unless you have both parents' signature, unless one of the parents is deceased or you have full custody of a child. You cannot. And I'm trying to inform hospitals and health services that if they have any suspicion when someone has a baby, that this may not be a real boyfriend, this might be a trafficker, or any doubt, don't put that name on the birth certificate. Because that poor baby and that poor girl is going to be stuck with this person for 18 years. And you can't remove it. It's very easy with DNA testing to add a name later on a birth certificate. It's absolutely no problem. I even do it at my office, DNA testing. So that's something to really remember, and I hope I will get my point across with that. I have also rescued another girl. Unfortunately, she did end up in detention before I got to her, but at least I got her back to Sweden, back with her mother, who was completely desperate to have her daughter back home. Sweden is not the most common country with people end up in the sex trade here as slaves, but it happens. It happens to anybody. You'd be very surprised, and these girls come over as tourists. East Bloc countries, they normally come over being lured into model position or something very attractive. And we had a case here a few years ago that I'm sure no one has heard about. It was a beautiful girl from Lithuania that came in, and my Lithuanian consul colleague was called because they put her in detention center for absolutely no reason. The official story was she didn't have enough money with her, but that was not what had happened. And she went down and talked to her in Lithuanian and found out that she was going to go to a friend who was staying at Wynn and had been there for 3 months. She was going to take over, so to speak, and stay there, live in Wynn Casino and Hotel for 3 months, and this boyfriend was going to pay for it. Classic case. I mean, it's clear as a bell to my Lithuanian consul colleague and myself that this is a trafficking ring. Unfortunately, the government agency we were dealing with didn't see it like we did, so they, instead of trying to find out who is her friend, who is the boyfriend, and who is the person who paid her way over here and is rounding up all the girls in Lithuania, they just deported her and threw her out. So we never could find any details out. But situations like this happens all the time. You will not hear about them. It doesn't get in the paper, but it does happen. As I said, we're 24 consuls. Use us when you can. If you don't take anything else with you today, I want you to take this away, that human trafficking is modern-day slavery. It's a serious, serious crime. And it's getting worse by the day. As Chaplain Barry was mentioning, gangs are now involved. Gangs are brutal, brutal. And sometimes, I just found this out after talking to the police the other day, they don't even necessarily have the girls have sex with the Johns anymore. They just want them to rob them and hit them and steal everything, which has been a problem for a long time. I've had a number of Swedish businessmen here who were victims of that, being drugged at the bar and taking a girl up to the room that had been talking to and waking up the next morning and everything is gone. No sex involved. And it's going a little bit that way now with the gangs. I have a handout that you probably wonder, what on earth is this? It's supposed to be sarcastic. It's not to be taken seriously. But this is what it's all about for a pimp or a trafficker. Money, money, money. Nothing but money. They don't care about the girl, they don't care about anything. But if they can make $2 million a year tax-free, they are very happy, and it's very lucrative. In Sweden, we have a Swedish model that was started a number of years ago where they prosecute the Johns, and it's proven to be extremely successful. And I am bringing one of the ambassadors at the Swedish State Department over here, hopefully next year, to talk about this and see if there is anything that can be adopted in this country too. There are other European countries that have followed them. So it's an interesting concept. It seems to work. If you kill the demand, then profitability is not as good anymore. And as I always say, the best thing we can do for our children, because this is what they are children, build their self-esteem. Because it's the ones with low self-esteem that are so high at risk. If you can build their self-esteem so they don't feel they have to go and look for love, feel and go and look for approval, we've come a long way. Any questions? Yes? Yeah, it's not the country itself, it's the US regulations. We consuls we have no influence over the ruling here from immigration. Like I said, the Lithuanian girl, there was absolutely no reason for her not to come into the country and ending up in the detention center. She had enough money, she had a credit card with her. You don't have to carry cash. Brittany, who is coming up after me here from Salvation Army, she works very closely with victims and helps them with visas and everything they could possibly need to stay here. And she will, I'm sure, go right into that and talk about it. They end up in detention center normally. In the cases I was talking about was over 10 years ago. It was different then. Now they are victims more. In those days, not the same. Today, they don't necessarily deport anymore, even if they overstay their visa. You know, most European countries can stay here 3 months. And if they overstay the visa, they normally end up in the detention and then they're deported, but not necessarily anymore. So they have the different visas to help them out. But the consul itself or the country, the foreign country, cannot interfere with the ruling of the American immigration. Anybody else? Well, thank you. The next speaker is Brittany Hoppolle from Salvation Army. She's a director of Seeds of Hope, their special program. She and her staff does phenomenal work with the victims. They deal directly with the victims, and she will tell you all about it.
We have 1 second for some technical stuff because I'm going to give her the lavaliers so she can move around, but you can still hear her. So.
Okay, sounds like everyone can hear me? Okay, so thank you for the lovely introduction. My name is Brittany. I am from the Seeds of Hope Human Trafficking Victim Services that we have here in Las Vegas. So we obviously aren't the only victim service provider here in Las Vegas that works with victims of human trafficking. We are kind of recognized as all-encompassing services for all types of human trafficking. So whether it's labor trafficking, sex trafficking, minors, adults, foreign victims, or victims born here in the domestic United States. We can kind of work with them, and I'll get into it, but we can't do all of our work alone, so I see a lot of faces I know out here, and all of us are doing the same job, working together to make sure these victims can become survivors. So I'll go through a little bit about what we do and how we partner with others in the community, just so everyone is aware. Okay, so Seeds of Hope, it stands for Saving, Empowering, Educating, and Restoring Dreams to Lives Shattered by Human Trafficking. In 2016, we had 160 victims that we worked with. Some of those are ones that we just met with once. We kind of did an intake, and then they kind of fell off. They weren't ready for services. Others we worked, up to maybe 6 months, a year. We have some clients that we've worked with for upwards of like 4 years, just depending on what their needs are. You can see the breakdown there of what it kind of looks like. We had, obviously, the majority of the clients that we worked with were domestic born here in the United States, more than likely born here in Las Vegas, were forced into sex trafficking, engaging in prostitution against their will. Most of them were females, and it was split between adults and juveniles. Of course, we do have, again, men that we work with. I would say of those 5 males that we worked with, only 1 was sex trafficked, but the rest were labor trafficked. Along the way, if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand. Just let me know, and I'll try to catch you. Okay, so I kind of wanted to start, and the reason I have a game piece, I thought that was maybe a little bit lighthearted after I did it, but the reason I did that was because I kind of see the road to survival as almost like a game piece. You take 3 steps forward, something knocks you back, or you get a card handed to you that says you must go straight to jail, do not pass go, do not get $200. So that's a lot of what a road to recovery looks like for a survivor, and that's just kind of what came to mind when I did that. So the main way victims are identified here in Las Vegas are through our local law enforcement, especially LVMPD, the vice detectives that we work with. Juvenile court and probation make a lot of referrals, obviously, for the juveniles. Adult parole and probation is kind of a new one to the scene, but they are identifying a lot of adult victims. So usually victims who have been victimized since the time they were a juvenile, and then all the way up into adulthood, and they're having a hard time completing their adult probation requirements. And there's a few officers and sergeants over there that are able to recognize the signs that they might be being forced into prostitution, sex work, and they're able to refer them over to us to kind of get some services to help them get out of that lifestyle. Along with that, we work with the FBI, Homeland Security. The National Human Trafficking Hotline makes a lot of calls to us, referring victims that kind of call in or other tips. The community court that we work with, it's a new court where they're trying to work with people in the strip corridor who are getting a lot of just kind of misdemeanors, citations in lieu of arrest. So they aren't even getting arrested. They're just being told, hey, show up to this court date. So a lot of them are trespassing. So these women who are getting trespassed over and over and over again, some we have been able to work with and identify that they are being trafficked. Along with that, the DA's office will work with us, send us some victims that haven't been identified before, victim service providers like yourselves out here, and then out-of-state referrals. Just to go over real quick some emergency response that we have here in Las Vegas. Obviously, I just talked about the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Lena and Barry went over it a little bit. So they are a 24-hour hotline, and we use that even here in Las Vegas. So even though it's national, there was a statistic that came out at the end of 2016 that Las Vegas was second in the nation for calls to that National Human Trafficking Hotline. So that doesn't mean that we're second in the nation for the amount of victims that we have. We're, I think, 4th in the nation for that. But that's a really good sign that we're doing a really good job of getting that number out there and helping to identify victims. So that's there, and they can connect victims with either law enforcement if they need immediate law enforcement or they want to kind of report on their situation. If they want nothing to do with law enforcement, they can always call us, and we can work with them or kind of get them situated with another agency that will work with them better. Also, the Southern Nevada Human Trafficking Task Force is the task force that we have here in Las Vegas, and we just received a grant for that whole task force through LVMPD and ourselves to make sure that we're providing really good services to these victims. And we have a 24-hour response to law enforcement. So when a detective identifies a victim, they're able to call that line and say, hey, can I have an advocate come out and we'll get them connected. Usually it kind of looks like arriving to the scene, getting them all over to our best friends over at the Shade Tree to make sure that they have somewhere safe to stay for the night. And then maybe some food, clothing, that kind of thing until a full-time case manager, victim advocate get in touch with them. And then finally, just to kind of get it out there so that everyone knows, everyone's involvement, the Nevada Attorney General also has a human trafficking victim contingency account. So that is accessed through victim service providers like those of us who are going to be up here today. And we can request immediate funds to help maybe a victim get home if they need something like that and we don't have the resources, or something where it would be a little bit harder for me to get the funds set aside, they're able to do that with us. Okay, so after emergency response, when we're responding to a victim, we always want to make sure we kind of check on their basic needs. So again, that's like making sure they have food, even if it's doing a McDonald's stop just so they have something in their belly because maybe they haven't eaten for 2 days. Making sure they have hygiene products. We can work on getting their Nevada ID, their birth certificate, social security cards, passport if they need that if they're a foreign client. And then we also help out with baby supplies, coordinating with emergency shelter. The Salvation Army ourselves, we actually have about 4 secret location apartments that we are able to house victims in. Because there's 4 and it's really independent living setup, we kind of vet that out really carefully. So we want to make sure that person is stable, is going to do well, isn't going to have a traumatic reaction to being on their own after they've been kind of under somebody's control for so long. So we do have those available for short-term immediate, and then we use them a lot for our long-term foreign clients who we're going to be talking about the visa process very briefly, but those who are identified as a trafficking victim, they're going for this specialized T visa, and they're an adult, we can kind of get them into a housing situation so they don't have to worry about finding a job, with all the immigration stuff going on, getting, deported, anything like that. They can have all their needs met while they're waiting to do things the right way. Okay, finally, benefits coordinating, so making sure that they're connected with welfare to have their food stamps, health insurance, things like that. Safety planning for the ongoing safety needs that they might have, and ongoing case management. Victim advocacy kind of shows up a lot of different ways. We can go to court with the victims, and that's the biggest thing that we do victim advocacy for. So when they do want to come forward and report on their trafficker, we're able to go with them to court and kind of walk them through that process, help them to understand what's going on. And when the time comes that they do actually have to get up on stand and talk about what happened, we're able to go in the courtroom. And there's a few of us out in the community that can do that too. Obviously showing up in juvenile court and advocating for what they have been doing while they've been on probation, the milestones they've been able to accomplish. Adult criminal court, kind of the same thing, like, hey, this person has been identified as a victim, they're working on these goals to kind of get out and stay out of that kind of lifestyle, and sometimes that can be enough for the judge to say, hey, let's not go forward with this solicitation charge, let's drop it down, something like that. Victim witness support, I kind of talked about that a little bit. We do a lot of work with the family court. So that could be something like my past coworker had an adult client, and she was being trafficked by a very malicious, he was a gorilla pimp. Did we kind of go into what those were? A gorilla pimp is somebody who is very physically abusive. So they have a few different kinds. There's a Romeo that kind of does the sweet nothings, kind of does the love bombing, makes them feel like it's a boyfriend-girlfriend type situation. There's a CEO, and he kind of is spitting game at her, saying, hey, let's start this business together. And then there's the gorilla pimp that forces them into prostitution using physical violence. So she had a gorilla pimp, and he was not only very physically abusive to her, he was very physically abusive to her under 1-year-old baby. So that baby was taken away by CPS, and since that, she was able to get out of this situation. She was on her road to recovery, and my coworker was able to go talk to the courtroom about what that kind of lifestyle looks like, talk about what she was kind of trapped in so that they could advocate for her to have her baby back. So they had to go through all the right steps, obviously, but she was able to gain custody of her child back. And then obviously TPO support, so we can go kind of fill out paperwork with them, we can turn it in for them, we can advocate for the phone call appearance. So if their pimp is going to show up and it might be violent, it might be something like that, we're able to kind of advocate to the TPO office that we need that phone call. We can kind of set up some other arrangements around the safety planning thing. And then finally, immigration advocacy. So we can get foreign clients who have reported and are willing to come forward about their situation. We can kind of get them connected with legal aid and then help out with all of that paperwork and explaining, you know, this is what this looked like. We have this cool kind of system that was set up by my old program director that, you know, if there are elements of trafficking, they've made a police report, but we aren't able to really settle in on, yes, this was trafficking. We work with the trauma center out in Boston, and they go through, it's like a 2 to 4 hour, it's intense psychological evaluation where they can kind of pinpoint some of the trauma that was induced by that trafficking, and that's a supportive document that is used in order to kind of help advocate for that person to get a T visa. And then so I just kind of go into some legal aid providers that we work with. So they'll work with them on the immigration process. Real quick, the immigration process. For a trafficking victim, they they set aside a whole new visa process, and it's the T visa. So U visa is for all victims of crime. They can apply for the U visa. It's, I don't know, somebody else might know it more than me, but I think it's like a 5-year waiting period, even for that visa to be approved. T visa, it takes about 6 months to apply and about another 6 months to hear back if you are approved, and then you have your T visa, you can work on getting your work authorization and you're good to go, at least for those 3 years. Another immigration status that we're able to work on is the continued presence, and that's if they're working with federal law enforcement. Homeland Security can request a continued presence for that person to be in the United States legally, able to receive services and possibly work for a year while that case is going on. So along with immigration, we work on helping out with consumer credit and criminal background checks, especially for the adults. So when a woman, and again, we're always talking about women, but there are boys and men who are caught up in human trafficking also. Because it's Las Vegas, I sometimes focus on women and what they're going through because that's a lot of what we have, but I don't want to lose sight on the men that are going through it too. But so when these victims are going through and they're in maybe the game of prostitution, things like that, they've been forced into it for so long, they have racked up quite a criminal background, and their consumer credit is trashed. I think that I would personally say, and if you've heard of the Wheel of Power and Control in human trafficking or domestic violence, anything like that, they have a section in there where it talks about that. So they trash their credit in order to keep that victim where they are. Because if she has terrible credit, she has a bad criminal background, how's she gonna get a job? Where is she gonna go to get an apartment? Who's gonna, give her that loan for that car? So we can work with them on kind of cleaning that up, along with some civil charges that come along, so they're able to pursue civil charges against their trafficker if there's enough evidence to hold that up. Family custody guardianship, we're able to get them connected with legal aid providers that will help along those lines, along with landlord-tenant issues, so maybe they had an apartment with their trafficker, both names are on the lease, and they need out, we're able to get them connected with a legal aid provider to help out with that, along with any other victim-related circumstances. I always kind of use this one as an example. I had an adult who was trafficked here from another part of the country, and she was driving in the car with her trafficker, and he had a bottom. Did we talk about what a bottom is? A little bit, yes, no. So a bottom is a girl who has also been victimized, forced into prostitution, and she's the most trusted girl in that circle of quote-unquote prostitutes underneath the pimp. So they're the ones who don't have to work as much, so they sometimes enforce the rules, they'll collect the money, things like that. So a pimp and his bottom were driving, they had the victim in the back of the car, he made a bad choice of running a red light, hit somebody, while he wasn't able to get, stopped by cops because I think he had parole and probation. Same with the bottom. So they pieced out and they told the girl, you stay here and you take the charges. Well, she didn't have insurance, she didn't have her driver's license, and by the end of the day, she had about $3,000 worth of charges, along with all this other stuff that was under her name, even though she wasn't driving the car. So we were able to get her connected with a pro bono attorney through the Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada, and they worked on clearing it all up, and all she had to do was take a decision-making class, and it was off her record. Because they were able to kind of find those elements, and she had made a report against him, you know, everything was matching up, that they could tell that she was being forced into this, and that she was kind of a unwilling bystander, especially for that car accident.
So, but she still needed to take a class, because at some point, you're still at fault for something, and we need you.
Yeah, so instead of the $3,000 worth of fines and everything else that she had to do, they were able to negotiate it down to absolutely no fines. We aren't going to force you to show that you have your driver's license. We aren't going to force you to show that you have car insurance. And all the other stuff that would have came along with it, she just had to go online and take that class and then prove that she did that. So, I mean, it's not perfect, but again, if all she had to do, if all she had to do was take that class, it's not too bad. So finally, education and employment, those are things that every single victim, survivor of human trafficking needs support with, especially the juveniles. And Esther's going to probably talk a lot about that because they work a lot with the juveniles and they got all that set up there for them. So we collaborate with the Embracing Project and with others in the community to make sure that education needs are identified. So if that means that maybe they need to go to a specialized school, maybe they are doing mainstream school, but they just need extra support while they're there. We're able to partner again with other agencies and go in there and kind of advocate for their needs on that level. Along with maybe high school just isn't for them. Maybe they just want to get their high school equivalency test done and over with, and they want to move on to maybe a trade school, higher education, anything like that. We can kind of help get them set up, meet with I always get this wrong, I always say CCDC, and they do not want to meet with them, with the Clark County School District. So CCSD, we get them connected there, got it this time. And we kind of help them to kind of talk through what their main goals are, and then they can go on from there with taking, again, that GED high school equivalency, taking the classes, and graduating out that way. Along with connecting with some other providers in the community. We're working on building that, especially with the adults, for some good job training. So working with FIT, with Help of Southern Nevada. I think I have others listed when I hit that part. So working with others in the community to make sure that these survivors, when they get to that point that they're ready to work, that they aren't stuck at just a low-level job where they're making minimum wage for the rest of their life, because that's sometimes a deterrent for staying out of, you know, the sex trafficking. Even though they don't get to keep the money, they feel like they're making like $4,000 a day, a week, whatever. Again, even though they don't get to keep it, they say, how can I make $4,000 a day, $4,000 a week, and then go and maybe make $4,000 in 4 months. So it's a huge setback for them when they kind of have to go through that, and they feel like they're stuck in that cycle of almost poverty. So we help them build resumes, brush up on their interview skills, make sure they have at least like a interview outfit so that they can get going on that. And as long as we're able to, we can help out with transportation. So sometimes that does mean, hey, I'll pick you up, I'll get you to that interview, and I'll get you back home. And then sometimes that means like, hey, I'll give you a 24-hour bus pass, let me know how it goes, I'm more than willing to give you another bus pass, just so that they have some way to be there and, again, be self-sufficient, because that's the whole goal of our program, is that these people can go from being a victim, where they're relying on somebody and being abused, to being a self-sufficient survivor. Okay, so along with everything else, survivors have a lot of health needs, whether it's mental health or physical health. So we work with Rape Crisis Center, FACT, again, Esther will probably get into that, I'm sure, with the juveniles. West Care will work on the substance abuse, Monte Vista, Spring Mountain Treatment Center. The list kind of goes on, and we utilize as many community providers as we can to make sure that these victims are able to get their needs met. On the physical health side of things, we just did a training with UMC, their emergency room, to be able to better identify and respond to victims of human trafficking, because they get a ton of trafficking victims through there, and we want them to be able to at least better identify and at least say, hey, you don't have to live this way. How about we try to get you help? Sometimes the victims aren't ready and they aren't going to say, yes, take me away, let me get that help, but at least they know that that's a place they can go when they are ready to get help.